The gap between the levels of testosterone that you are taking and the levels of testosterone that you would be producing, the gap between these two levels is side effect territory. So let's start with the overarching question of, well, what causes problems on TRT? And this is a much broader topic because there are a lot of factors at play. The first thing that I think is very important to drill down on is this gap between expectations and the reality of treatment. So, as I've covered in my previous lectures that you may have seen, if you haven't, I would suggest watching the Your Brain on Testosterone lecture series. But ultimately, TRT is building the foundation, it doesn't build the house. So, when you restore or give yourself for the first time optimal testosterone levels, this is not going to be a magical panacea to all of your problems. It will solve the problems that are directly being caused by a hypogonadal state. But a lot of the time, the real outcomes of treatment that people are hoping to achieve actually come from the work that needs to be done on top of having this corrected foundation of endocrine health. So TRT will give you the results that you deserve from your inputs and outputs, whether that is sleep, training, nutrition, hydration, working on your mental health, working on your overall competency in life as a man. But it is not going to do all that work for you. And I think that this is a really important point to note from what I've seen working with thousands of clients over the years, is that a lot of the time people are expecting that once their levels reach the point in their blood that they deem to be optimal or their provider deems to be optimal, that all of a sudden they're going to be this completely changed human that embodies all of these different positive masculine attributes. And ultimately that can come to fruition, but not only does TRT take time, but it also takes time to do this work. Now, the other point that I think is also very important, and this is something that comes up all the time, and I would say that this is one of the most common causes of side effects that maybe is a little bit less straightforward than just increasing your frequency of injections, which is that the overlooked cause of usually secondary hypogonadism in younger men hasn't been resolved. So if the body is actively suppressing your testosterone production, it is not in a biological state that is primed to metabolize and utilize the optimal testosterone levels that you are administering exogenously, whether it's via injections or topical, or if you're using another terrible form of administration, I guess that can also be the case. But the analogy that I've used, and this might be the first time you hear me saying this, or it might be the 1,000th time you've heard me say this. I've actually done an entire lecture on Cars, the movie, which I think is a very good analogy for how humans work. It's kind of like a sentient car or a sentient machine. It's kind of like putting a sports car engine into an old bomb of a car, like a Suzuki Swift that's completely broken down, smoking out of the bonnet, needs a service. And instead of servicing the entire car, it's simply coming in and saying, well, I'm going to whack a sports car engine in there so that it drives faster. And the second aspect of this, which is more complicated because humans are not simply just machines, we also have free will and we can make decisions. A lot of the time, the decisions that we make are not conducive for our long-term health, but can be beneficial for feeling good in the short term, is that TRT in this analogy also doesn't teach you how to properly drive the car. And maybe the reason the car is damaged is because you drove it badly for a while. Now, again, there are many reasons why men have hypogonadism that are intractable. Maybe it is age-related hormone decline. Maybe it is to do with damage to the testicles from an injury, or chemotherapy if someone has had testicular cancer. But in practice, particularly in the demographic that is on YouTube a lot of the time there is an unresolved root cause of why the testosterone was low to begin with. And when the provider comes in and simply goes, yep, your levels are low, let's bring them up. If the body is in a state in which that production was actively being suppressed for a reason, we are now creating a disconnect and we're working against the body rather than working with it. And this is not necessarily a reason not to do TRT. I mean, if someone had a time machine or they haven't pulled the trigger yet, it's definitely a reason to see, okay, can I fix this thing to see if my levels come back to optimal? But if someone has already pulled that trigger and is, 6 months, 12 months, a couple of years down the road, again, using the car analogy unintentionally there, it may be a matter of saying, how can we work with the body and with the testosterone levels to meet the medicine halfway? And I want to go through some of those actual pragmatic, strategic things that pop up so that people can actually solve this problem, not just understand the philosophy of why this is going wrong in the first place. So undiagnosed or chronic medical conditions which are not properly managed, this is also a big one. If you've got something going on in other aspects of your health, particularly what I see a lot is things like mismanaged chronic pain and injuries, physical dysfunction in the body. People are throwing peptides at themselves rather than actually doing rehabilitation exercises. Maybe hypothyroidism isn't properly managed. Maybe there's an issue with the liver that actually needs treatment. There can be all these other situations going wrong with the body. If you come in and optimize the testosterone levels, in a lot of cases, that may actually help the other condition. But depending on what's going on, it could actually make the symptoms of the other condition worse because you're stressing part of the body which is already under stress. Now, the other very common root cause, which I've spoken about a lot, and you can watch my TRT 101 lecture, you can check out the ebooks. I put a variety of resources online about this, is shit protocols. It doesn't matter how optimally you are living your entire lifestyle, or if all of these aspects are properly dialed in. If you're injecting a mill of testosterone once a week, or you're using pellets, or you're using Testagel, or, your levels are too low or they're too high, or the protocol is just completely all over the place, that is a much easier thing to fix. But unfortunately, the standard of care and expertise of a lot of practitioners and clinics globally is extremely substandard, and it's the actual protocol itself that can cause these issues. So I want to come back to this expectation management because this is really important.
If you've just started TRT, it is completely normal to feel overwhelmed and confused. There's a lot of new territory to cover, and there is a lot of conflicting information. I wrote TRT 101 so that you can have everything that you need to know in an instruction manual in one place that you can refer back to, that you can have all the questions answered before they even come up. TRT 101 is my best practice approach for TRT from start to finish, and it contains everything that you need to avoid all the challenges and pitfalls that I've seen come up in my clients over the last 5 years. You can check it out via the link below.
So in 2025, TRT, which is, the time I'm recording this, you may be watching this in the future. If so, hello from the past. But TRT is a very marketable thing. When I first entered the industry, actually, let's backtrack even further. When I first started TRT as a patient, it wasn't really a thing. There wasn't YouTube stuff about it. It wasn't common knowledge. If I told people and said, I'm on TRT, they'd go, what's that? Now, TRT is kind of like a household term. People know what it is. And I think ultimately this is a huge positive. But it's important to recognize, and I can speak from this with expertise because my original undergrad degree is in marketing, is testosterone is a very marketable thing to a man, both in terms of the testosterone molecule itself and what we perceive as being attached to having higher testosterone levels. I liken this to selling a thirsty guy in the desert a glass of water. Almost every man wants more testosterone, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's actually a good thing. And if it wasn't for the shutdown of natural production, if it wasn't due to the regulations around TRT, if it wasn't due to it being a bit more of a commitment than other, supplemental interventions, it would be a much more straightforward and a much more popular treatment option, even more so than it is now. But the problem that we have is that because a lot of practitioners and clinics and business models are simply running off a basis of wanting to be as profitable as possible, TRT is often sold to patients with false expectations. It's sold as a panacea. It's sold as a miracle cure for all aspects of physical and mental health. And testosterone is beneficial for all aspects of physical and mental health when done properly, but it is not a miracle solution to everything else that may be detrimental to that. So the gap between expectations and reality can be problematic because when TRT is not doing what you wanted it to do as fast as you wanted it to do it, or both, it can lead to people becoming frustrated. It can lead to people adding things to their protocol or changing their protocol haphazardly and reactively. And this can ultimately lead to more problems. So while TRT is undoubtedly a tool to help resolve a lot of issues with a man's health, there are generally two sets of symptoms in hypogonadal men: symptoms which are primary to the hormone deficiency, and then symptoms which are secondary to the hormone deficiency. And it is crucial to understand that while TRT may flip the switch on biological issues directly impacted by testosterone itself, it can take months and even years of work to undo the damage to the body and the mind that come from a prolonged state of low testosterone. And this state of low testosterone often leads to poor self-care because as a result of feeling terrible, this leads often to people coping with this in a way that is maladaptive. And this is part of being a human. The problem is that this can actually compound and become a root cause problem in and of itself, especially if these maladaptive behaviors and coping mechanisms become habituated into someone's identity, into someone's routines, and then they ultimately become the embodiment and outcome of this poor pattern of self-care. So it's very important for me to restate this, and I'm probably going to restate this a bunch of times. So, bear with me. TRT does not do the work for you. It allows you to receive the results you deserve. Nothing more, but also importantly, nothing less. So there's this honeymoon period that a lot of men get on TRT. And this is, I would say, neutral. It is not good. It is not bad. It just is. And some people get it. Some people don't. Some people say it's placebo. This is nonsense. It is very, very real. There can also be placebo aspects to it too. But if you are using enanthate or cypionate, although it does take 8 to 12 weeks for levels to fully build up in the body, you are still getting a significant spike in androgen levels very early. If you don't believe me, go and get a blood test 24 hours after your first injection on TRT, and you will see that your levels are significantly elevated. The thing that people need to understand is that if you do achieve this honeymoon effect, this can kind of lead to a mentality where people chase the dragon. And this is a term that people often use in drug addiction and recreational drug use, where the first time someone uses the drug, it can be much more euphoric than the habituated pattern of behavior due to receptor changes and changes in neurochemistry as a result of repeatedly administering a compound. But it's very important to understand that if you do get a honeymoon period, that this is going to be something that feels like taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But if you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, you've still taken 1 step forward. And the alignment of expectations needs to be that that 1 step forward is a positive, not that the 1 step back, which still nets you 1 step forward overall, is a negative. So TRT does not work properly without creating a human being who would naturally have these optimal testosterone levels. It is paramount for patients to understand just how much work, effort, and time is going to be required to meet their expectations. And this can be a difficult pill to swallow because I've seen a lot of people and I've spoken to a lot of people who have this mindset that if you take testosterone now because you're administering it exogenously, you don't have to really do all the stuff that you would need to do to have those levels naturally, like looking after yourself properly, sleeping enough, not drinking alcohol, eating well. And I get this because from a layman's perspective, this makes sense. I don't think this is stupid, but it's wrong. I wish it wasn't this way because my job would be easier. Everyone who I know who works in the industry would have an easier job, and every patient of TRT would have better outcomes. We would all like that. But sometimes in life, actually all the times in life, things are not that simple. So the gap between the levels of testosterone that you are taking and the levels of testosterone that you would be producing, the gap between these two levels is side effect territory. And the thing that we have to understand as compassionate people who are working with men on improving their health is that it takes time to improve this. And it's often a lot of mental work, it's physical work. Even if someone starts doing everything right tomorrow, they still need time to be the outcome of being the guy who's done all that stuff positively. So there is a period of time that it takes to bring the body into a state of optimal health. And this is something that people need to expect, people need to understand, and people need to factor into the journey of starting TRT to say, if I want to achieve, ABC, XYZ, whatever goals I have, I need to be willing to actually do the work that will allow me to achieve those results. So TRT unlocks a capacity in order to achieve these results. It doesn't deliver the full potential of treatment without the patient, as I said before, meeting the medicine halfway. It just doesn't. And that's just the reality of it. So TRT will not force the body into becoming an optimally androgenic, high testosterone man. In fact, if chronic diet and lifestyle patterns are not congruent with this, there will be just as many side effects as benefits because you've put your body into an equally unnatural state as having low testosterone. So, a really good kind of guideline and time frame to look at, because if you set expectations a bit lower and more realistically, you have the opportunity to have those expectations exceeded. So TRT takes at least 6 to 12 months of stable optimal levels to begin to take full effect, and it takes years to fully manifest. So patients must understand that the benefits of TRT actually lie in the chronic androgen exposure, not just the acute subjective effects of starting TRT at first. So many of the benefits that people are actually looking to achieve come from the trajectory shift resulting from more energy, more resilience to stress, and improved recovery. The benefits come from what are you going to do and who are you going to become when you have this improved biological resilience and capacity. So I'm going to break this area down into practitioner considerations and then patient considerations. So the thing that practitioners need to do is inform their patients or clients of this prolonged timeline of results, as well as lifelong dependence and the responsibility to adhering to protocols and blood testing instructions. It's really important to educate clients of the importance of becoming healthy overall, to look and feel the way that they're wanting to, and to ensure that they understand that testosterone is not this magic pill. I also really strongly believe from practice, actually, it's not a belief, it's knowledge. I know this, that if you are going to work in this field, you need a referral network of personal trainers, coaches, even psychologists, allied practitioners, physiotherapists, specialists that are understanding of TRT that you can refer your patients out to. And that way the patient can correspond with them on that area of expertise. And then they can come back to you so that you can manage that as a central point of care for the patient. It's really important to work as a team. If you want to be a jack of all trades, you will inherently be a master of none. Now, when it comes to patient considerations, one thing that I think is a really good mindset to adopt and to push into your brain is that the men that you look up to, who are the way they are, that you want to be more like, that you want to emulate, you want to be more like them and less like how you are in your hypogonadal state, they are the result of the long-term habits required to maintain that natural optimal androgen level, combined with the exposure to long-term chronically elevated androgens. So if you're really far off track with your diet and your lifestyle and your self-care and your overall health, that means that this will take more time and more work for you to resolve this. So adding more testosterone, adding more supplements, adding more medications, this will not actually solve or allow you to get away with problems that come from diet and lifestyle. Many of the side effects that they experience when correcting this are due to the biological consequences of chronic inflammation. It's important to support and adjust the TRT and supplement protocol for the patient in terms of where they're at now based on their different state of health at baseline. Daily injections actually do lead to a natural slight fluctuation in levels because of these